What if everything you know about reality is just an illusion? Imagine walking through life thinking you understand the world, only to realize that the rules you live by might not be what they seem. What if the very foundation of your beliefs is built on contradictions you've never noticed? Mirror paradox. Every day you look into a mirror. It's a routine. A quick check before you head out the door. A glance as you pass by. But have you ever stopped to consider just how much of your true self is actually reflected? You might see your face, your body, the familiar features that everyone else sees, but the mirror only shows you a version of yourself. It is, in essence, a two-dimensional image that can never fully capture your essence. This is where the mirror paradox begins to play its game. The paradox lies in the fact that, while you rely on mirrors to confirm your appearance, the reflection that you see is not exactly you. It's reversed. It's not the real you. It's simply an image that's been flipped horizontally. The image in the mirror is distorted by the limitations of the glass, and no matter how hard you try, that reflection can never be the true you. You may say, but that's just the way mirrors work. And you'd be right. But the paradox extends far deeper than just the mechanics of an object. The reflection you see is always a step behind you. By the time your brain processes the image in the mirror, the you you're seeing isn't the you that exists in the moment you're standing there. In a way, that reflection is always lagging, always a fraction of a second behind. Now, let's dive deeper. Mirrors show us the surface, our appearance. But how much can we truly know about ourselves from our appearance alone? The reflection doesn't capture the complexity of our emotions, our thoughts, or the depth of our experiences. It can't convey the essence of who we really are, our fears, our desires, the things we hide even from ourselves. So, in a way, the mirror only shows you a small fraction of your true self. Think about the layers of your personality. What about the parts of you that others don't see? The mirror can never reflect the real you, the you that thinks and feels and dreams. It can't show the quiet part of you that contemplates the universe, or the person you are when no one is looking. Every time you stand in front of a mirror, you're simply viewing a surface-level version of yourself, a thin slice of the vast and complex individual that you are. But here's where it gets even more intriguing. What if the mirror doesn't just reflect how we look, but how we perceive ourselves? When we look into the mirror, we don't just see a face, we see a person. We see an image of ourselves, yes, but it's also shaped by our own self-perception. This means that the image in the mirror might not be entirely true. It could be influenced by our insecurities, our self-judgment, and even our idealized version of who we wish to be. So almost as if the mirror is more of a projection, a place where our inner image of ourselves is reflected back at us. And here's the kicker. What if that projection is all we really know of ourselves? If you base your self-worth on your appearance in the mirror, are you really understanding who you are at your core? Or are you just seeing a superficial version of yourself, shaped by the world's standards and your own beliefs? Now, think about this. If we only see ourselves through the lens of a mirror, are we truly seeing the real version of who we are? Or is the image in the glass a distortion, one that changes depending on our mood, our perspective, or our surroundings? The more we rely on the reflection, the more we might begin to lose touch with the true essence of who we are, the person we can't see in the glass, the person that exists behind the surface. Let me ask you this. What if you couldn't look in a mirror for a year? Would you still recognize yourself? Would you still know who you are? Without that daily reflection, would you feel as connected to yourself, or would the lack of that visual confirmation make you feel like you've lost touch with your identity? Could your sense of self remain intact if the mirror was suddenly taken away? This brings us to a larger question. If the mirror only shows us a distorted image, how do we truly understand ourselves? What do we need in order to see ourselves fully? Not just as others perceive us, but as we are at our core. And if we can't even trust the reflection in a mirror, what does that say about how we interact with the world around us? Are we seeing things as they truly are? Or are we only seeing a reflection shaped by our perceptions? If this paradox has made you question how you perceive yourself, share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think the mirror shows who you really are? Or is it just an illusion? Friendships and paradox. Friendship is a bond that brings immense joy, trust, and companionship into our lives. It's one of the few relationships in which we can truly be ourselves, knowing that the other person accepts us for who we are, flaws and all. But have you ever stopped to think about how friendships begin and end? How sometimes the very same people who once brought us so much happiness can also become the source of our deepest heartache. The paradox lies in the inevitable, yet often unnoticed transition that happens in many friendships. While friendships are based on mutual care and understanding, it's often the changing of time, circumstances, or personal growth that causes them to unravel. Here's the catch: the very elements that made the friendship meaningful in the first place, shared interests, common experiences, and the closeness that comes from knowing each other so well, are often the same elements that lead to its end. At first, it feels like a friendship will last forever. You have fun together, support each other through thick and thin, and build memories that feel eternal. It's easy to believe that nothing could ever tear that bond apart, but time has a funny way of changing people. What was once a shared passion may lose its spark as one person evolves or experiences life in a different way. Life's path takes us in different directions. Some friends grow closer, while others grow apart. But here's where the paradox creeps in. You would think that as we grow older and change, our friendships should grow with us. However, the closer we become to someone, the more likely it is that our differences will start to surface. It's almost as if the very act of getting to know someone too well, understanding their quirks, their flaws, their fears, opens the door for conflict. What once was tolerable becomes irritating. What once seemed cute becomes annoying. This slow drift can feel like an invisible shift, and before you know it, a friendship that once felt so certain is now in question. What's even stranger is how we react to these changes. We tend to hold on to friendships, trying to preserve them for fear of loss. We try to fix things, repair the distance, but sometimes it's those very attempts that cause the relationship to further unravel. The desire to preserve the connection often results in trying to force things back to how they were, instead of accepting that maybe, just maybe, things are meant to change. Quote, as strange, isn't it? That the very closeness that forms the foundation of a friendship is what ultimately makes it vulnerable. The more time you spend with someone, the more you expose your vulnerabilities. You reveal your flaws, true self. But this also opens up the possibility that these same flaws, the things that once bonded you, will eventually lead to your downfall. The intimacy that once connected you can become the space where conflicts grow. The trust you once shared may become a breeding ground for resentment and misunderstandings. The friendship's end paradox lies in the reality that while you can't control when a friendship ends, you can learn to accept the inevitable nature of it. We all know that nothing lasts forever, but when it comes to friendships, we tend to hold on to the belief that they should. Perhaps we feel like we've failed, or that we've lost something valuable. But in reality, friendships ending is a natural part of life. We grow, change, and evolve, and with us, so do our relationships. It's through these transitions that we learn, adapt, and even become stronger. Friendships that once felt like constants in our lives may drift away, but they leave behind the lessons and memories that help shape us into who we're meant to be. Freedom or control paradox. Freedom is often seen as the ultimate goal, a state in which we are liberated from constraints, able to live life as we choose. It's the idea that if we are truly free, we can make our own decisions, carve our own path, and pursue our own happiness without anyone telling us what to do. But what if, in our quest for ultimate freedom, we're actually creating the very thing that limits us the most? This paradox reveals itself when we realize that freedom, in its purest form, often leads to a lack of direction, a sense of chaos, or even a feeling of being overwhelmed. You see, when we have no boundaries, no constraints, no set path, we often don't know where to go. The mind can become flooded with endless choices, and the very freedom we sought starts to feel like a burden. We crave structure, guidance, and certainty, things that inherently require some form of control. At first, control feels like the opposite of freedom. It feels restrictive, like a cage, like something that keeps us from doing what we want. But paradoxically, it's control that gives us the ability to fully enjoy our freedom. Consider, for example, a child. A child may desire the freedom to play without restrictions, to do whatever they want, whenever they want. But the paradox is that without a framework, rules, boundaries, structure, their freedom becomes chaotic, and they might feel lost, confused, or even frustrated. It is only with guidance, with some level of control, that they are able to truly explore the world and find their way. As adults, we often experience this same paradox. We want the freedom to live without constraints, to pursue our dreams, and to be our own person. Yet, when we lack control over our choices, our time, or our environment, we end up feeling overwhelmed, stressed, or directionless. The desire to break free from society's rules and expectations often leads us into confusion and dissatisfaction. Ironically, it's the very things we resist: structure, discipline, control, that allow us to maintain our sense of direction and clarity. In life, we face this constant balancing act between freedom and control. We want to be free to make our own choices, but we also need some level of structure to avoid falling into disarray. It's this delicate dance that often determines how successful, fulfilled, or at peace we feel. Too much freedom, and we may feel adrift in the vast ocean of choices. Too much control, and we may feel trapped in a rigid, unfulfilling routine. This paradox extends beyond our daily decisions and routines, touching on deeper aspects of personal growth. When we set out to achieve our goals, whether they're related to career, health, or relationships, we often face the challenge of balancing personal freedom with the necessary structure and discipline required for success. The more we give ourselves the freedom to choose, the more we risk losing focus and control, which can hinder our progress. On the flip side, when we impose too many rules or restrictions on ourselves, we might find it difficult to make the bold, free-spirited decisions needed to innovate or move forward. The freedom or control paradox also teaches us that true freedom doesn't mean total abandonment of structure, but rather the thoughtful exercise of control where it matters most. It's about knowing when to embrace spontaneity and when to apply discipline. In this way, we create a life where we can truly thrive, choosing our own path while still having the tools to navigate the obstacles along the way. This paradox challenges us to reconsider how we view freedom and control. It's not about choosing one over the other, but about finding the right balance between the two. True freedom doesn't come from a complete absence of control, but from having the power to choose where to exercise control in our lives, while still allowing space for spontaneity and exploration. In the end, it's not a matter of freedom or control, but the wise integration of both. Too many roads. Paradox. Imagine standing at a crossroads with countless paths ahead of you. Each road represents a choice, a decision that could lead you to a new adventure, a new experience, a new version of yourself. At first, the endless options might seem like a gift, an opportunity to choose freely and shape your own future. But as you stand there, something unexpected happens. The more roads you see, the more paralyzed you become. The abundance of options begins to weigh heavily on you. This is the too many roads paradox. The idea that having too many choices, while seemingly liberating, can actually lead to confusion, indecision, and dissatisfaction. It's a paradox because, in theory, the more options we have, the better. More choices should mean greater freedom, right? Yet, the overwhelming number of possible directions often leads to analysis paralysis, a state where it becomes difficult to make any decision at all. We all been there, faced with too many options for something as simple as choosing what to have for dinner or picking a movie to watch. The more we think about it, the harder it becomes to decide. What if we choose the wrong thing? What if we miss out on something better? In these moments, the sheer abundance of choices turns from a blessing into a curse, leaving us feeling stuck and dissatisfied, no matter what we choose. The same paradox appears in bigger decisions too. When we're faced with important life choices, like which career path to pursue, where to live, or who to date, the number of available options can be overwhelming. Each decision carries its own set of possibilities, risks, and consequences. The fear of making the wrong choice can prevent us from making any choice at all. It's as if the more opportunities we have, the less freedom we feel to take a step forward. This paradox has its roots in the way our brains process choice. Studies have shown that when faced with too many options, we tend to become less satisfied with our eventual decision, even if it's the right one. We imagine all the possibilities we left behind and wonder if we made the best choice. This phenomenon is known as decision fatigue. It's the psychological toll of having to weigh too many options, which can lead to feelings of regret and doubt. But here's the real kicker. The more choices we have, the more we crave even more options. This cycle can become self-perpetuating. We start seeking more paths, more opportunities, believing that the next choice will give us the perfect answer. But it never does. Each new choice just brings with it more uncertainty, and the pressure to make the perfect decision intensifies. It's like being stuck in a loop of endless possibilities that only seem to make the decision harder. Ironically, it's often the simplest paths, the ones with fewer options, that bring us the most clarity and satisfaction. When we narrow our choices, we feel less overwhelmed, more focused, and more confident in our decision-making. Sometimes, the key to happiness isn't finding the perfect path, but choosing one path and committing to it fully, without constantly second-guessing ourselves. In today's world, where we have endless choices at our fingertips, from shopping to career options to relationships, the too many roads paradox is more relevant than ever. The internet has given us a world of infinite opportunities, but it's also made it harder to know what we really want. The trick is not to strive for more choices, but to embrace the value of limitation. By narrowing our focus, we allow ourselves to move forward with greater purpose and satisfaction. So, next time you're standing at a crossroads, feeling overwhelmed by the many roads ahead, take a moment to breathe and remember this paradox. Sometimes, fewer options can lead to greater freedom, and the act of choosing a path, any path, can be far more empowering than trying to find the perfect one. Values price paradox. Have you ever bought something and, after some time, realized that its value didn't match the price you paid? Or perhaps the opposite has happened. You buy something seemingly small, but its value to you increases dramatically over time. This is the values price paradox. The idea that the true value of something is not always reflected by its price. In fact, the price we pay can sometimes distort our perception of value entirely. At first glance, it may seem like price is the most straightforward way to determine value. Higher prices typically signal better quality, more luxury, or greater prestige. However, when you step back and think about it, value is often far more subjective and personal than a price tag can suggest. You can spend a fortune on something and find it disappointing, while something that cost you very little can end up holding immense sentimental or practical value. Think about the things you value most in life. Are they the ones that cost the most? For many people, the items they cherish most aren't necessarily the expensive ones, but rather the simple ones that hold a unique meaning. A small token from a friend, a piece of artwork, or even an old book passed down through generations. These are often priceless, yet their monetary value is far from high. It's a reminder that true value often lies in intangibles, like memories, emotions, or experiences, rather than cold hard cash. Let's flip it. What about things that cost a lot? It's easy to fall into the trap of equating high price with high value, but this is where the paradox kicks in. Just because something is expensive doesn't mean it's worth it. There are countless examples of overpriced goods and services that don't live up to the hype. Think about the times you've paid for a luxury brand or an expensive gadget, only to find it didn't deliver what you expected. In those moments, the price seems almost like an illusion, masking the true value behind a shiny exterior. This paradox extends beyond material goods too. In relationships, for instance, how do we assign value? We often invest time, energy, and emotions into people. And yet, sometimes those who cost us the most emotionally don't bring us the happiness we anticipated. On the flip side, small gestures of kindness from someone you didn't expect can have an outsized impact, creating lasting joy and meaning. Here, the price, the amount of energy or effort put into the relationship, doesn't always match the emotional return. In fact, the price paradox highlights something interesting about our psychology. We tend to overvalue things that cost us more because we want to justify the money we've spent. This is called cognitive dissonance. When we convince ourselves that something is more valuable than it really is, simply because we've invested in it. But this bias can lead to dissatisfaction, as we may ignore flaws or shortcomings in an attempt to match the price with perceived value. On the other hand, sometimes a lower price can increase the perceived value of an item, just because it feels like we've gotten a deal. In this case, the bargain price adds value to the experience, making us feel smart or savvy. It's a psychological trick that makes us appreciate the item more than we otherwise would. So in the end, value is not a simple equation. It's shaped by our perceptions, emotions, and experiences. It's about what something means to us, how it makes us feel, and how we use it in our lives. The paradox is that price is only one piece of the puzzle, and often it's not even the most important one. Do you agree with this paradox? Have you ever bought something that didn't live up to the price tag, or found value in something unexpected? Frugality trap paradox. Imagine you've spent years diligently saving money, cutting back on every unnecessary expense, and focusing solely on the pursuit of financial security. You're proud of your frugality, of how little you need to live a fulfilling life. But then, something strange happens. You find yourself stuck in a cycle, constantly sacrificing for the future and never truly enjoying the present. Welcome to the frugality trap paradox. On one hand, being frugal is often seen as a virtue. Saving money, cutting down on luxuries, and living below your means can provide long-term security and peace of mind. It's all about delayed gratification, right? You know that one day, all your sacrifices will pay off, and you'll be able to live freely without the weight of financial concerns. But here's the paradox. In the process of saving so much, you may end up missing out on the very experiences and joys that make life worth living. The trap lies in the idea that you are sacrificing in the present for a better future, but in doing so, you lose sight of the present moment. As you tighten your grip on your savings, your enjoyment of life diminishes. You keep waiting for the perfect time to treat yourself, to splurge, to indulge. But that time never seems to come. The future always seems too far away, and each small indulgence feels like a step back from your goals. In fact, the more you save, the less you end up enjoying what you have. You get trapped in a constant cycle of restriction and self-control, believing that every dollar spent today is one less dollar for tomorrow. It becomes a mindset, a belief that any expense is an unnecessary waste, and that true happiness can only be found once you have enough money to stop worrying. But what happens when you reach that enough point? Will you have spent so much time saving and sacrificing that you've forgotten how to enjoy the fruits of your labor? The frugality trap paradox also brings to light an interesting question about our priorities. We spend so much time and energy focusing on saving and accumulating wealth. But do we forget to ask ourselves why we're doing it in the first place? Is it for a life we truly want, or have we simply been conditioned to believe that this is what we're supposed to do? As we obsess over every penny, we might end up forgetting what actually brings us joy in the first place. Whether it's experiences, relationships, or simply taking the time to relax and enjoy life's small pleasures. This paradox forces us to reconsider the true meaning of financial freedom. It's not just about having money. It's about the ability to use it in a way that enhances your life today, not just in some distant future. The irony is that in our attempt to control our financial future, we often lose control of our present happiness. The more we focus on accumulating wealth, the more we may find ourselves emotionally and mentally deprived of the very things that matter the most: connection, fulfillment, and joy. This is why it's important to evaluate your relationship with money and your lifestyle choices. Saving for the future is important, but so is living in the moment. Perhaps the solution lies in moderation, being mindful of how much you save without completely sacrificing your ability to enjoy life right now. Spending on experiences that enrich your life, such as travel, hobbies, or simply treating yourself every once in a while, can be just as valuable as saving for the future. The frugality trap paradox reminds us that life is too short to be spent constantly deferring happiness for the sake of a future that might never come. We can't live in perpetual sacrifice without losing out on the moments that truly matter. After all, we work hard to save money, but is it worth it if we never actually live to enjoy the rewards? So the question is, how do we find that balance? Are you caught in the frugality trap, or are you able to live in the present while preparing for the future? Stability and chaos paradox. In our daily lives, there's an assumption that stability comes from control, from organizing everything, from keeping things in a predictable rhythm. Chaos, by contrast, is often viewed as something to be avoided, as it brings unpredictability, disorder, and fear. But there's a deep and surprising truth in the stability and chaos paradox. Sometimes the very chaos we fear is the catalyst for the stability we seek. Let's start with nature. We look at the turbulent forces of the world, storms, earthquakes, and wildfires, and think of them as disruptive. Yet, paradoxically, nature's ecosystems thrive despite these chaotic events. A forest may be destroyed by a fire, but from the ashes, new growth emerges. The destruction fosters renewal. In the same way, the changing weather patterns, rain, wind, and drought, create a dynamic environment where life must adapt to survive. What seems like chaos is, in fact, part of the larger process of stability within nature. Nature constantly adapts to, evolves through, and survives the chaos, ensuring that life persists. On a more human scale, think about the periods of personal crisis we go through. We all face moments of emotional or mental turbulence, the end of a relationship, a job loss, a personal failure. These events feel chaotic. Yet, in the aftermath, many of us discover new strengths, fresh perspectives, and deeper resilience. The chaos of change often forces us to reassess our lives, pushing us to discover new paths, new sources of stability. In this sense, personal growth often occurs because of chaos, not in spite of it. It's the moments of greatest challenge that often teach us the most about ourselves and allow us to rebuild in ways that we never expected. At a societal level, this paradox becomes even more apparent. History is full of revolutions, economic crashes, and social upheavals, events that seemed like pure chaos at the time. Yet, after the dust settles, something new is often born from the rubble. Societies rebuild, reinvent themselves, and create new forms of order. Even though the initial chaos seems to threaten everything, it often sparks innovation, creativity, and a new sense of unity. Take the aftermath of wars or revolutions. Although the destruction is painful and costly, it often leads to major advancements in art, science, and social systems. Out of the chaos, new structures emerge that are more resilient than before. But the most interesting part of this paradox is how it applies to us individually. We may think that avoiding chaos is the way to achieve stability, but true stability comes from understanding that chaos is inevitable and can even be beneficial. When we learn to accept and navigate through the chaos, whether in our personal lives or in the larger world around us, we discover that we're not simply surviving chaos, but we're actually learning how to thrive within it. Chaos isn't just something we get through. It's something that can build us up, challenge us, and show us new possibilities. In the modern world, this paradox becomes especially relevant. We live in a time of constant change. Technology evolves at an astonishing rate. Social norms shift. The world feels more chaotic than ever. Yet, it's in this very chaos that we can find opportunities for growth, resilience, and innovation. The key is in how we respond to the chaos around us. If we resist change and cling too tightly to old structures, we may find ourselves in turmoil. But if we embrace the constant flow of change, we find stability not in rigidity, but in adaptability. It's also worth considering that chaos, in some ways, might be essential for progress. Without disruption, without unexpected challenges, there would be no need for innovation, no pushing of boundaries. Chaos forces us to question the status quo, to reimagine what stability means. In this sense, it's not about avoiding the storm, but about learning how to dance in the rain. So, the stability in chaos paradox teaches us an important lesson. Stability is not about control, but about adaptability. The chaos we fear isn't something to avoid, but something to navigate, learn from, and grow through. It's the messy, unpredictable forces of life that, when met with resilience and creativity, create the deepest forms of stability. Rather than trying to avoid the storm, maybe we should be learning to understand it, to live with it, and to let it shape us into stronger, more adaptable beings. How have you found stability in the midst of chaos in your own life? Do you embrace the unpredictable, or do you resist it? Pleasure's prison paradox. Pleasure is often viewed as the pinnacle of happiness, something we all desire. In a world full of distractions and instant gratification, we're constantly in pursuit of things that bring us joy. Delicious food, new experiences, social validation, or even just a moment of relaxation. But what if I told you that the more we chase pleasure, the more it can actually imprison us? This is where the pleasure's prison paradox comes into play. On the surface, the idea of pursuing pleasure seems harmless, even natural. After all, who wouldn't want to feel good? However, the paradox lies in the fact that when we continually chase after pleasure without considering its consequences, it can lead to a cycle of dissatisfaction. Think about it. How often do we indulge in something, thinking it will bring us happiness, only to feel empty afterward? It's as though the pursuit itself is what keeps us trapped in a never-ending loop. The more we have, the more we want, and the less satisfied we feel. This paradox is deeply rooted in the human condition. The pursuit of pleasure, when unchecked, can quickly turn into a form of addiction. When we experience something pleasurable, our brain releases dopamine, a chemical associated with reward and pleasure. This creates a feeling of happiness and contentment. But the catch is, over time, our brains get used to this dopamine rush, and we need more and more of it to achieve the same level of satisfaction. So we continue to seek more pleasure, only to find that it never fully satisfies us. Instead of reaching a point of contentment, we become dependent on the very thing we thought would make us happy. Take karma, for example, the constant desire for material possessions. We think that buying a new car, getting the latest gadget, or moving into a bigger house will bring us happiness. And while these things may bring momentary joy, that feeling often fades quickly. The excitement of a new purchase doesn't last long, and soon we're back to desiring more. It's like a hamster running on a wheel. We're moving, but not getting anywhere. This paradox isn't limited to material things. It can also apply to our emotional and psychological needs. We might think that constantly seeking approval from others, indulging in our fantasies, or even continuously chasing after pleasure in relationships will bring us long-term happiness. But just like with material things, these fleeting pleasures tend to wear off, and we find ourselves wanting more, often at the expense of our emotional well-being. In fact, many people end up feeling trapped by their pursuit of pleasure because they're caught in a cycle of expectations. We start believing that the next moment of joy will be the one that fulfills us, but it never quite lives up to our expectations. This constant chase for the next high leaves us feeling empty, anxious, and unfulfilled. But here's the twist. True, lasting happiness often comes not from indulging in pleasure, but from learning to appreciate the small, simple moments in life. It's about cultivating a sense of mindfulness and presence in the now, rather than seeking constant gratification. The paradox is that when we stop obsessing over pleasure and learn to embrace contentment in the present, that's when we truly experience joy. Instead of trying to get more from life, we find that happiness is already here, in the ordinary, everyday moments. Research has shown that people who prioritize meaningful experiences and relationships tend to report higher levels of happiness than those who focus solely on pleasure. It's not that pleasure is bad, it's just that it needs to be balanced with meaning, purpose, and mindfulness. When we focus too much on the fleeting moments of pleasure, we lose sight of the deeper, more fulfilling aspects of life. So, how do we escape the prison of pleasure? The key is balance. It's not about giving up pleasure entirely, but about learning to enjoy it in moderation and without attachment. Instead of chasing after more, we can start to appreciate what we already have, savoring the simple pleasures without becoming obsessed with them. True fulfillment comes when we shift our focus from seeking external sources of pleasure to cultivating inner peace, gratitude, and mindfulness. This paradox teaches us that the more we chase after pleasure, the more it slips away from us. But when we learn to let go of the need for constant gratification and embrace the present, we free ourselves from the prison of endless desire. By finding contentment in the small moments, we unlock the door to deeper, more lasting happiness. Accumulation Paradox. The idea of accumulation is deeply ingrained in our lives. From collecting experiences, knowledge, and wealth, to building relationships and possessions, we are constantly adding to the things that we believe will bring us happiness and security. The more we accumulate, the more we feel we are advancing. But here lies the paradox. The more we accumulate, the less we seem to actually have. Let's explore this concept and why it's so deeply paradoxical. In theory, accumulating should make us feel more secure, more successful, and more fulfilled. For example, we work hard to accumulate wealth, thinking that the more we have, the happier we will be. We fill our homes with possessions, convinced that each new addition will make us feel complete. And as we collect more knowledge or experiences, we expect to become wiser, more enlightened. But the paradox is that with every new accumulation, the more pressure and burden we create for ourselves. Take karma, for instance, the concept of wealth. Many people believe that if they had just a little more money, they'd be happy. So they work tirelessly, accumulating more and more, always chasing after the next paycheck, the next promotion, or the next financial goal. But what happens when we finally achieve these goals? Instead of feeling content, we often feel even more anxious. We may worry about losing what we've accumulated, or whether we're doing enough to maintain it. The more money we have, the more we feel the need to protect it, invest it, and ensure it continues growing. The burden of what we've accumulated ends up outweighing the satisfaction we imagined it would bring. Similarly, think about our possessions. We constantly buy more items. A new phone, clothes, a bigger house, or a more luxurious car, each time thinking it will make us happier. But as we accumulate, we also begin to accumulate clutter, maintenance, and responsibility. The more things we have, the more time and energy we must spend on keeping them. Instead of being free to enjoy the things we've collected, we're often bogged down by them. They take up physical space and mental energy, and soon we find ourselves overwhelmed by all that we've accumulated. The same idea applies to knowledge and experiences. We think that accumulating more knowledge will make us wiser, but in reality, the more we learn, the more we realize how little we know. The more experiences we collect, the more we may find ourselves comparing them and feeling that we need even more to feel truly fulfilled. We accumulate these experiences as though they're trophies, but they often leave us with a sense of emptiness, as we realize that the pursuit of more has not led to deeper satisfaction. The accumulation paradox also extends to relationships. We may have many friends or connections, but in the process of accumulating them, we can lose the depth of genuine connection. The more we spread ourselves thin across social networks, the less time and energy we have to invest in the meaningful, quality relationships that bring us true fulfillment. We become overwhelmed with maintaining all the connections, but lack the closeness that we originally desired. So, what's the solution? The key is to realize that true fulfillment doesn't come from accumulating more. It comes from knowing when enough is enough. The paradox teaches us that accumulation often leads to burden, not happiness. When we learn to embrace minimalism and focus on quality over quantity, we can find freedom and peace. Instead of constantly striving for more, we can appreciate the things, experiences, and relationships we already have. The accumulation paradox shows us that the constant chase for more can leave us feeling trapped rather than fulfilled. By learning to let go of the desire to accumulate endlessly, we can achieve a sense of balance and satisfaction. True happiness comes not from the number of things we own or the wealth we amass, but from the depth of our experiences, the quality of our relationships, and the ability to enjoy life in the present moment. Infinite path paradox. Have you ever stood at a crossroads in life, faced with multiple possible paths, and wondered which one to take? It's a situation we all encounter, deciding between career choices, relationships, or life goals. But here's the paradox. The more choices we have, the harder it is to choose. The more paths we explore, the more we seem to feel like we're walking in circles, trapped in the process of choosing rather than actually making progress. On the surface, having infinite paths ahead of us might seem like a blessing. The world offers countless opportunities, and in theory, the more options we have, the more freedom we should feel. After all, who wouldn't want to have endless possibilities before them? But the paradox emerges when we realize that all this freedom and abundance can in fact lead to confusion, overwhelm, and ultimately indecision. Think about it for a second. When you're faced with too many options, you might experience what's called the paradox of choice. As the number of available paths increases, so does the pressure of making the right decision. Suddenly, each choice feels significant, and the fear of choosing poorly can prevent us from acting altogether. Instead of feeling liberated by choice, we feel paralyzed. It's almost as if we're so afraid of missing out on the perfect option that we end up missing everything by not choosing at all. Take comma, for instance, the world of career decisions. In today's fast-paced world, the career possibilities seem endless. The internet has made it easier than ever to switch fields, take on side projects, and pursue passions that didn't exist a generation ago. But with so many options to explore, the decision-making process becomes overwhelming. Should you stay in your current job, or should you leave and chase something you're passionate about? What if one job is better than the other? What if the path you don't choose leads to untold success? The sheer number of possibilities makes it almost impossible to feel confident in the choice you make. In relationships, this paradox often manifests as well. Thanks to modern technology, dating apps, and social media, the number of people we can potentially connect with is staggering. On paper, this sounds ideal. No longer are we limited to the small circles of people in our immediate environment. Yet, having too many potential partners can cause a strange sense of dissatisfaction. You may find yourself constantly wondering if someone else could be a better match, and this doubt prevents you from fully committing to anyone at all. The abundance of options makes it harder to form lasting, deep connections, as we are continually distracted by the what-ifs. This paradox extends to our personal lives, too. Think of the amount of content we consume daily. Endless articles, social media posts, videos, books, and more. While it seems that there's a wealth of knowledge out there, we often find ourselves overwhelmed and distracted, unable to focus on anything long enough to gain any depth. The more we try to explore, the more fragmented our understanding becomes. The pursuit of infinite knowledge can feel like we're always looking for the next big thing, leaving us unable to appreciate the present or finish what we started. The infinite path paradox teaches us that the more choices we have, the less clarity we seem to gain. Ironically, having too many paths before us can be paralyzing. Instead of feeling empowered, we're left stuck, unable to move forward, because every choice feels like a monumental decision. It's like standing at the edge of an infinite number of roads and being unable to take the first step. In a way, this paradox mirrors life itself. As we get older, the number of decisions we have to make grows exponentially. And yet, instead of moving forward with confidence, we can find ourselves stalling, waiting for the perfect opportunity or the perfect choice to emerge. It's easy to get trapped in the cycle of second-guessing, always wondering if there's a better path out there, even when we've already made a decision. But how do we overcome this paradox? The key may lie in limiting our options rather than expanding them. By narrowing our focus, we can reduce the noise and make clearer, more intentional decisions. Committing to a single path allows us to invest our energy fully in it, rather than wasting it on pondering endless alternatives. In some cases, less truly is more. Embracing simplicity in our choices can lead to greater satisfaction and a sense of accomplishment. Invisible choice paradox. Imagine you're walking through a store, surrounded by hundreds of products. Each shelf is lined with colorful labels and tempting offers. You feel like you're in control, making your own decisions. But what if I told you that most of your choices are not as free as they seem? What if your decisions are actually being shaped by invisible forces you don't even notice? This is the invisible choice paradox. The idea that the choices we think we're making freely are actually influenced by external factors, often in ways we don't even realize. We all like to believe that we are rational beings, capable of making decisions based on our own preferences and needs. But the truth is, a lot of the time, our choices are subtly guided by things we can't see, whether it's the color of a product, the way it's positioned on the shelf, or even the way it's priced. Companies have spent billions of dollars researching how to influence your decisions without you even knowing it, using psychology, behavioral economics, and even neuroscience to push you toward certain choices. Take the simple example of a grocery store. You walk down the aisle, and your eyes are drawn to the bright red cans on the shelf. They're positioned at eye level, their labels are bold and attractive, and they seem to stand out more than the other products. Without thinking, you might grab one, believing you made a choice entirely on your own. But in reality, the store has strategically placed these items in the most visible spots, knowing that you are more likely to purchase what you see first. Your choice was not as free as it seemed. It was influenced by the invisible hand of marketing. In fact, many of the choices we make daily are influenced by subtle cues we don't consciously pick up on. Think about how stores often place low-priced, impulse-buy items near the checkout counter. They know that you're more likely to grab a snack, a magazine, or a pack of gum as you're waiting in line. This is another invisible force that guides your decision, and it's done in such a way that you feel like it's your own idea to make the purchase. The invisible choice paradox extends beyond shopping. Think about the world of social media. You scroll through your feed, and you encounter posts that are tailored to your interests, likes, and even past behaviors. You might think you're deciding what to engage with, but in reality, algorithms are carefully curating your experience. They use data about you, things like what you've liked, what you've watched, and even what you've commented on, to show you content that will keep you engaged for longer. While it may feel like you're making free decisions about what to watch or read, the content is being filtered and directed in a way that nudges you towards certain actions. Even your choice of friends or relationships can be subtly influenced by external forces. Have you ever noticed that people who seem to share your values or opinions are often the ones you connect with most easily? This isn't just random. It's often the result of confirmation bias, where you're drawn to people who reinforce your existing beliefs. What you might not realize is that the social circles you move in are shaped by algorithms and social pressures, creating an environment where your choices feel like they're coming from within, when in fact, they've been influenced by external factors all along. But here's where the paradox really kicks in. While we may be influenced by these invisible forces, we still feel like we're making choices freely. The fact that these influences are subtle means we rarely question them. In many cases, we don't even recognize how much they impact our decisions. Our minds believe we are acting independently, when in fact, we are being guided without our awareness. It's this disconnection between what we think is happening and what is actually happening that creates the paradox. The invisible choice paradox serves as a reminder that not all of our choices are as free as we think. By understanding how subtle forces shape our decisions, we can become more aware of the ways in which our choices are influenced. Awareness, in turn, gives us the power to reclaim some of that control and make decisions that are more in line with our true preferences, not those that have been quietly guided by others. Do you ever feel like your choices aren't as free as they should be? Have you noticed invisible forces influencing your decisions? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the mysteries of human behavior. Finiteness in Infinity Paradox. Infinity. It's a concept that fascinates and baffles in equal measure. We often think of it as something boundless, something that stretches forever in every direction. But what if I told you that even within infinity, there is a paradox, a kind of finiteness that can't be easily explained? Welcome to the Finiteness in Infinity Paradox, a mind-bending thought experiment that forces us to rethink our understanding of the infinite. At first glance, infinity seems simple enough. It's endless, right? But mathematicians have discovered that infinity is not as straightforward as it might seem. In fact, there are different sizes of infinity, some larger than others. This idea challenges everything we know about numbers and sets. For example, let's consider the set of natural numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. This set is infinite, because there is no end to the numbers you can count. But here's the paradox. Even though the set of natural numbers is infinite, it's still countable. That means you can list the numbers one by one, and although the list is endless, it has a certain order to it. Now, comma. Let's compare this to the set of real numbers. All the numbers that exist between any 2 points on the number line. Unlike the natural numbers, the real numbers are uncountably infinite. No matter how hard you try, you can't list all the real numbers. There are simply too many of them in between any 2 numbers, like between 1 and 2. This is a much larger infinity, even though it might seem the same at first glance. In this sense, infinity is not one size fits all. There are infinite numbers of different sizes or types of infinity, some of which are larger than others, and yet both sets, the natural numbers and the real numbers, are considered infinite. This paradox challenges our fundamental understanding of infinity. If infinity is truly boundless, how can there be different kinds of it? How can a seemingly infinite set, like the natural numbers, be smaller than another infinite set, like the real numbers? The finiteness in infinity paradox forces us to confront the limitations of our own understanding. Infinity, it seems, is not just an endless stretch, but something that behaves in ways we can't easily grasp. Another way to think about this paradox is to imagine a room with an infinite number of doors. Each door leads to another room with an infinite number of doors. If you keep walking through these rooms and opening doors, it feels like you're trapped in a never-ending cycle. But paradoxically, you can never truly escape because there's always a new door to open. This illustrates the idea that within infinity, there can be finite moments, finite choices, even though the whole structure of infinity seems endless. It's as though, within infinity, the limits of time and space can appear to behave as if they're finite, but they're all just illusions. This paradox is deeply connected to the limits of our perception. We can understand the idea of infinity in a theoretical sense, but when we try to experience it or truly grasp it, our minds struggle. Infinity doesn't follow the rules of the finite world we live in. It bends and twists our logic, revealing a complex and counterintuitive reality. The idea that infinity can have finite aspects seems impossible, yet it's mathematically and philosophically sound. The finiteness in infinity paradox ultimately invites us to question our perception of the universe itself. If even something as fundamental as infinity is not as it seems, if within it there can be boundaries and distinctions, what does that say about the universe and the very nature of existence? Is there more to the infinite than meets the eye? Silent decision paradox. Imagine you're faced with a decision, one that seems trivial at first, like choosing what to have for dinner or deciding what movie to watch. In these moments, your mind is quietly weighing options, weighing consequences, perhaps even without you realizing it. But what if I told you that even in the most silent moments of decision-making, there's a paradox at play? A paradox where the very act of deciding can happen without any conscious input. Welcome to the silent decision paradox, where choice and consciousness blur in surprising ways. At first glance, we believe that decision-making is an active, deliberate process. We weigh pros and cons, reflect on past experiences, and consider potential outcomes. This is the narrative we've all been taught. We make decisions consciously, with our thoughts guiding us. But research into human behavior suggests something quite different. In many instances, especially with seemingly simple decisions, we make choices without consciously processing them. The silent decision paradox exists because, often, we believe we're making a choice, when in fact, the choice has already been made by our subconscious mind, long before we consciously realize it. For example, think about how you might decide to get out of bed in the morning. You might think you're choosing to get up, but in reality, your body may have already made the decision for you, perhaps due to an internal clock or a habit that's been established over time. The decision might feel like it's your own, but in essence, the process is happening beneath the surface. This paradox challenges the idea of free will, making us question how much control we truly have over our own choices. In a more extreme case, consider how sometimes, when we're put on the spot with a big decision, say deciding between two job offers, our initial reaction or gut feeling often guides us more than any logical thought process. We might think we're weighing out the pros and cons, but in reality, our initial decision may have already been made by our subconscious before our logical mind even had a chance to catch up. In this way, our conscious mind might be playing catch-up, trying to justify the choice that was made without our awareness. This paradox extends beyond simple decisions. For instance, in major life choices, such as whom to marry or which career path to take, we often tell ourselves that we decided after careful thought. But what if those decisions were shaped long before we ever put them into words? What if the true decision-making process is not as conscious and deliberate as we think? What's even more interesting about the silent decision paradox is that it highlights how much of our experience of reality is based on assumptions. We live in a world where we think we control our actions, yet much of our behavior is shaped by invisible forces, instincts, habits, and deeply ingrained patterns of thought. The paradox lies in the fact that, even though we're unaware of these forces, we believe we're still in control. The idea of silent decisions suggests that there's a hidden layer of choice beneath the surface, one that we can't directly observe, but that plays a huge role in how we interact with the world around us. This paradox becomes even more intriguing when you think about how it applies to more abstract decisions, like how we react emotionally to a situation. We might believe that we're consciously choosing how to feel, but often our emotions arise before we even realize they're happening. The silent decision paradox forces us to acknowledge that our minds may not always be as conscious and aware as we think. As we begin to understand this paradox, it becomes clear that much of our decision-making process is shaped by factors beyond our immediate control. Whether it's our past experiences, the way we've been conditioned, or the deeply rooted patterns in our subconscious, we may not be as free in our choices as we once believed. What does this mean for our sense of autonomy and control in life? So, what does this all mean? Do we truly have control over our decisions, or is much of our life simply the result of unconscious processes that guide us in ways we don't understand? And how much influence do we have over the invisible forces that shape our choices?